My talk tonight is about the wonderful new journey we are taking on at Wolwedans called the Arid Eden Project, which describes our Vision 2030. Before we go there, I just want to introduce myself to those people who don't know me. I'm Stephan Brückner, in my early 50s. A father of 3 children and a third generation Namibian. And I've been at the helm of Wolwedans for the last 25 years. So basically I started it. The gentleman you see in the picture up there is my father Albi, who sadly passed away 4 years ago, but I'm sure he's with us tonight up there on the cloud and listening in. I'm going to structure my talk like this. We go into the past a bit and see where we came from. Then we go into the present, which is sort of, for me, the year 2020. And then, needless to say, the majority of the talk is focusing on the future. And I took this picture on the 19th of December 2019 and stumbled across this notion of life is a bridge, the past, present, and future. And I used that picture in a very successful personal Facebook post where I sort of said, you know, the world is in quite a mess with climate change and Greta Thunberg and paradigm changes and so on. And we don't really know where this whole thing is going and where the bridge is going to go to or lead to behind the dune. And it was actually quite a successful post. And if I read it today, it does actually seem like I looked a bit into a crystal ball and got a notion there. I also stumbled across a very nice quote by the also late Garth Owen Smith, a huge conservation icon here in Namibia and Southern Africa, who said, to improve the future, we must first understand the present, and to really understand the present, we must know the past. So let's go to the past, and that's how Namibia started. So Namibia in the early 1980s comprised completely dilapidated, drought-stricken sheep and cattle farms. And my father Albi knew this area from his early business days, and he knew of its beauty, and he was sort of very much taken by the abuse of the land. And when an opportunity arose to buy the first farm in this Namib area bordering the Namib Naukluft Park, or the Diamond Area 2, he grabbed it, and then it was 1 farm and 2 farms and 3 farms. And so he somehow just never stopped. Namib today is a association not for gain. There is a number of different landowners. We see that most of the land these days is held by trusts, family trusts, companies and private individuals. And conservation is really the core objective of the Namibia Nature Reserve. And tourism was introduced as a means to an end to raise income for the reserve through the collection of park fees. So there is a number of concessionaires in the reserve, and they do their business, and they collect a conservation levy on behalf of the reserve from every guest. So there's my father Albi. He was, I think, a very happy man when he finally passed on, because he did one thing which he always preached, and that is, his favorite saying was, "Remember, son, your last shirt hasn't got a pocket." So, I mean, he was quite an astute businessman or business personality in Namibia, and he had the funds to get all this going. But instead of taking it with him to heaven, which he obviously can't, he put most of his money into starting this amazing reserve, and I think that's a wonderful legacy he's leaving, and it's also a wonderful role model for the next generation. Okay, Namibia is defined by incredible landscapes and very diverse at that. We've got very impressive mountain ranges. Many peaks are over 2,000 meters. And then it's defined by endless grass plains. And then as a special feature, there's a dune belt running right through the reserve. So the diversity of forms and colors is often referred to as a visual utopia. You will see some landscapes during the presentation, but this presentation talk is not so much about Namibia after all, so we need to leave that for another time. There is a rich fauna on Namibia, mainly obviously the oryx, and also other plains game like springbok, zebra, hartebeest, and then a lot of other big and small creatures. There's a very interesting array of flora, which obviously in a desert environment comes into spectacular flower after the rainy seasons. And one cannot imagine how this barren, dry land transforms into a green paradise after the rains when we have them. Unfortunately, we are sort of in our 7th year of drought, although this morning we had a few drizzles, which is quite unusual for the end of October. So everybody is very hopeful that not only in the rest of Namibia, but also the Namib people will be blessed with good rains, and that would be the result. The geology is very intriguing with numerous rock formations, and you probably heard this saying that they say the Namib Desert is, or Namibia as a whole, is really like an open book for geologists, because remember, you've got the same geology in South America, in Brazil, it's just all grown over. So in the Namib, it lies barren and open. And then we've got other mysteries here, like these fairy circles that you find from the Orange River to the Kunene, but the scientists are quite uniform in their opinion that nowhere in Namibia are they so pronounced and beautiful as on a certain area on Namibia. So this is a big zebra herd galloping through the field of mysterious fairy circles. And in the heart of this magic wonderland lies Wolwedans. And Wolwedans is an old sheep farm. When we started, there was a house and some huts and a storage room, and that was it. And it started actually off as a ranger station. And then it gradually grew into our Wolwedans logistical base and village. So, how it all started. I mentioned before that initially the idea of my father was conservation. It's hard to believe that 26 years ago there was a campsite at Sesrim, and coach tourists, bus tourists would stay at Maltahöhe, an interesting little town about 180 kilometers from Sossusvlei, which was the big attraction. So, I mean, tourism was actually non-existent, and things got a bit tough. There was a recession, and the hobby of my father could not be financed anymore from sort of reserve funds, so something had to happen. And my dad called me. I was just finishing my master's in Berlin, and asked me whether I would be interested to take on the mission to develop tourism in Namibia. Yeah, I was quite torn apart because I had a wonderful job offer in Hong Kong, and I wanted to join the jet set as a management consultant. And but yeah, I felt morally obliged to help the old man and said, okay. That was, by the way, after he said, you are free to do what you want. Just remember, if you don't do it, somebody else will have to do it. And if you come back in 10 years' time, don't expect the red carpet. So I did it. And because the dunes are such a unique feature of Namibia, I decided whatever we do, it's got to be in the dunes. Everybody told me I'm mad. You can't build something in the dunes because it will be a ghost town like Kolmanskop, that deserted town close to Lüderitz, in no time. Well, 25 years later, we've got 3 camps in the dunes and we are still there. So early days, little igloo tents, 4 of them. Then there was this wet, or the bathroom sort of back to back, which was quite awkward. And that's how we started. As I said, the aim was to provide an income for conservation. And we structured it in a way that every tourism concession, which is, by the way, completely independent from the nature reserve, that was a very important strategic decision to not put those into one basket, because making money would always get the upper hand. And this is a conservation project after all. So the concessions are all independent and collect set park fee. And it's interesting, in the 25 years, because we would have celebrated our jubilee in July this year, Wolwedans collected 27 million rand, which is roughly 1.5 million US dollars in park fees. What's very interesting with this graph is where you see Lehman crisis and Ebola, which sent shock waves into our commercial system with the occupancy drop of 25%. In the overall picture, it just created a little dent. And then obviously we are now dealing with COVID-19, which was a massive disruption, not only for Wolwedans, that's now sitting with 0 income since sort of mid-March, but naturally also for the Namibia Nature Reserve. So collecting money or funds for conservation was sort of ingrained in our DNA, and it's quite naturally what we do. Another concept of the past I would like to share with you is what we call business in balance, which is something we introduced as a concept or a theme 3 years ago. If you look to the left, you have the blue bar is net profit after tax, and the green is the park levy we collected. So you can see in 2016, profit exceeded park fees collected. Then in 2015, our Wolwedans Foundation really got very active as an entity in its own right, and it lacked funding. And instead of going out there begging for money, I thought, why don't we make every guest a donor of the foundation naturally by just adding it to the accommodation rate as a top line item. So it's separate from the accommodation rate, and also importantly, it's non-commissionable for the travel trade. And in 2017, you can now see that with the conservation levy and the foundation levy, we are sort of in an equilibrium or good balance with our net profit, which is, I think, in itself an absolute remarkable situation if you have a business that collects actually more money for good than it puts in its own pocket. And because nobody complained or moaned about this levy, well, some agents did, but they, it was sort of a take it or leave it situation. I felt encouraged to load the levy yet a bit more, and by introducing a sustainability levy. And the result of that in 2018 is now really getting a bit out of balance, as you can see. We had the same sort of scenario in 2019. Our net profit was a bit lower because we spent a little fortune on our refurb programs. By the way, I'm quite happy to share these figures with you because transparency is one of our future unique values, and we are quite happy to share our figures with strangers and staff. Also something of the past, because we really intuitively try to do things as sustainable as possible. We never dug our rubbish into a big hole. We managed our water wisely. We never drove off track. We built very soft. So we really tried to do the right thing, but it was sort of, as I said, intuitively. We went for solar energy quite early, solar hot water, etc. And then maybe it was no surprise that about 11 years ago, we were approached to become a founding member of an organization called The Long Run. And The Long Run is a global association of like-minded conservation and tourism enterprises who really put sustainability very big on their flag. And as long runners, we all abide by the 4C model. We will get to those C's later. And as long runners, if you really tick all the boxes, you are becoming a global ecosphere retreat, which I think today is sort of the Rolls-Royce of sustainable certifications. And I'm happy to see that Julie Cheetham from Grootbos, our partners in crime in this ambitious endeavor, is joining us as well. Okay, so we've done quite well, and last year we won the Responsible Tourism Award in Namibia, which was sort of, you know, the highest level we could get in Namibia. And so on the whole sustainability front, we were definitely, I think, the #1, and also our association with The Long Run helped us to address the whole sustainability issue in a much more structured way. But, well, I don't like the word, but there was a problem. We maybe got so carried away, or if I say we, I will actually take the blame on myself. I got so carried away with sustainability and doing all these amazing things that we maybe neglected our commercial enterprise and our product and our bread and butter a little bit. Adding to that, we had the situation where there was a lot of competition all of a sudden popping up in the neighborhood. And as long as that happened at Sossusvlei, which is 100 kilometers north of us, it didn't matter so much. But all of a sudden competition was on our doorstep. We had a lodge south of Namibia called Sonop. Natural Selection built a camp on Namibia and beyond, jacked up their desert lodge incredibly. So it became quite clear that something probably had to be done. And adding to that was obviously influxes from the outside, like, you know, there are all these words like paradigm shift, ethical brands, consciousness, Greta Thunberg, balance, etc., etc. And it became clear to me that something needs to happen. And I also didn't want this to happen to us. I came across a very interesting book, which I can really recommend highly. It's by the author Charles Handy, and it's called The Second Curve. And what it basically says is every organization, every empire, every company, every school, NGO sort of follows this pattern. So you started, you work hard, then you grow and grow and grow. And then you reach a point where either you become complacent or you somehow miss the boat. And then very often you enter a downward spiral, and that's the end of it. I mean, there's many examples in the world and also in business. Just think of names like Nokia and Kodak. So the concept of the second curve is to catch that moment when things start to slide and launch yourself into a second curve and really reinvent yourself. And that is what we were at towards the end of last year. And then we had a workshop in Cape Town with our sales and marketing reps, Suzanne Bailey Coop them and brainstormed a bit, okay, what is the second curve for us? And one concept that popped up there that I felt very strongly, this is where it's going. You know, we've been doing the 4Cs for 10 years. And so what was new? And especially everybody else is now doing sustainability. So it isn't really something that helps you to stand out. And what I thought was the next sort of move was spirituality. But then obviously we very soon realized you can't make that sort of, too much of a focus, because then your guests will think they all have to do yoga and meditate in the morning and eat healthy food and might subsequently not come. Anyway, so we then planned a workshop in March, at the end of March, where we were going to introduce 5 new concepts into the fold. And that workshop was in preparation of the future. And it was themed changing into 5th gear. So the number 1 priority was a major revamp of all our camps and the service delivery. The second point was to bring the client into the center of all we do, especially in the minds of our staff, that they understand that the client is actually the purpose of why we are here, and also becoming a people-centered organization. The third point was a shift from passive consumption to active participation in terms of how we present ourselves and the Wolwedans experience, which then also would lead to a re-engineering of our activities to feed the head, hand, and heart as a concept. We'll get to that later. Then we wanted to add a 5th C, which we then decided was consciousness, into our sustainability mix, and introducing balance and happiness as the new purpose. We'll get to the happiness part later. So these 5 points in brief. So at the end of 2018 already, we embarked on a massive refurb program in most of our camps by really redoing the infrastructures, soft refurbs, and that progress was in full swing because we wanted it to be ready in time for our jubilee, which was late July 2020. And then COVID struck and all this work came to a grinding halt. This is the guest, the concept of the guest at the heart of things. So you see the person there in the center, the guest, and the first ring is our frontline staff like waiters, housekeepers, guides, bushman trackers, who are really, the face of Wolwedans in dealing with the guests. The next level is your support functions like laundry, preparation, kitchen, maintenance. And then you have your outer circle of your different management. And Stephan Brückner is just sort of orbiting around this wonderful planet Wolwedans and keep taking some satellite shots from high above and trying to correct things here and there. And basically what this does, it just completely changes the classic pyramid where you've got the boss at the top and a whole lot of soldiers at the bottom who maybe often ask themselves, what is my role and what difference do I make? And by turning it this way, a waitress at any of our camps actually comes to realize that she is maybe one of the most important people in the whole chain. This is the shift from passive consumption, which is the old tourism paradigm, like bring it on, show me the big 5, take me to the most amazing sundowner spots, serve me the best snacks possible, and just like consuming. And I think we need to move away from that, and we also need to get more active, which obviously goes hand in hand with burning less carbon to actually remain active, whether it's in the desert or elsewhere. So we get to that later. And then it's the concept of feeding not only the head, but also the hand and the heart. So head is all intellectual things like your conservation story, the whole sustainability story, astronomy, sort of things that you need to grasp on an intellectual level. The hand is all activities that you do with your body, but it's also doing something with your hands, actually getting your hands dirty. We'll get some examples of that. And the heart is obviously stuff like the arts, wonderful choirs, yeah, primarily that. And then we also decided we're gonna do a big drive to disconnect to reconnect. So we want to actually make all our camps Wi-Fi free, except for one Wi-Fi lounge, which we are busy building in every camp. And we wanted to go slow and mindful. That's a definite trend. And I'm, personally actually tired of people that want to see the whole of Namibia in 12 days from the Fish River Canyon all the way up to the Caprivi or Zambezi region. And we need to just slow things down, which means longer stays. And then we have got the consciousness and balance aspect. For us, it's mainly business and balance, people and balancing people, planet, and profit. And last but not least, the concept of happiness. And on that one, when we were talking about the spirituality thing, and it was quite clear that won't fly. What could be the it? And I was in Germany early January, and I stumbled across a book by the Minister of Happiness from Bhutan. And that tiny nation in the Himalayas actually rates their gross domestic happiness higher than GDP. And if you see our history, you can imagine that this concept resonated with me. And then I started to do research and found out that there's actually an institute in Germany called the Corporate Happiness Institute, where this concept of Bhutan is now transformed or transported into the corporate world. So we are up to something there. And I think at the end of the day, really at the end of the day, what is that we all want? I mean, we want to do a lot of things, but I think foremost, we want to be healthy and we want to be happy, right? So I think whilst it sounds a bit bold, it's maybe something that will guide us. And then this happened. The workshop didn't happen. We couldn't get our whole team tuned into the new way. And Wolwedans was mothballed. And yeah, I was a bit confused. So the word cloud got even more foggy. And I mean, the first 3 months was sort of just damage control, trying to figure it out. Obviously, there was the hope that this madness will be over soon. As we now all know, it will not be soon, anytime soon. And in this sort of context, I decided to go into quarantine, into this wonderful place called the Chateau Namib. It's a tiny little abode in the western plains of Wolwedans, and probably a good place to be these days. Okay, obviously I didn't spend 3 months in the Chateau, but a lot of time down at Wolwedans, and tried to make sense of this muddle. And the outcome was what I call the Matrix 25. And that is basically our framework for the Arid Eden project. We'll get to that a bit later. So at the end of this thought process, it's now time to reboot. We are almost there. We are almost ready to launch the Arid Eden project. And that's what I'm going to talk for the rest of our time. I would like to read this. You can probably also see it, but because this nails it actually quite well. So in a nutshell, the Arid Eden project is the framework for the Wolwedans Vision 2030 and provides a cohesive theme and identity of our journey ahead. Underpinned by a business philosophy of balancing people, planet, and profit, it could become a practical blueprint for building back better, more sustainable and equitable tourism conservation economies, not only in Namibia, but globally. In addition to driving change and inspiring a new way, the Arid Eden project is also about the pursuit of happiness. Happy people, guests, team, and stakeholders alike, a happy and healthy environment with all its living creatures, and importantly, a happy bottom line. So what does our road ahead look? One thing everybody, I think, agrees with is that you need to get more resilient and you need to put your eggs into different baskets. It's probably a no-brainer, but at the end of the day, how many of us have really practiced this preach? So we are seeing 5 areas where we are engaging actively in the next 10 to 25 years. And they are not necessarily all commercial, as you will see, but it's 5 different spheres, as I call them. So foremost is hospitality, because that's our bread and butter, that's our business, that's our financial lifeline. The second field we want to engage in actively, in which we have done for the last 12 years, is education in general. We want to really jack up or build up our horticulture. It's also nothing new. We've been doing that for 10 years, but we want to take it to different levels. The same accounts for ecology and wildlands. And a project for the future would be a clothing brand once the Arid Eden project is well established. Quite interestingly, our Wolwedans Desert Academy is what currently keeps us alive. You know, most tourism enterprises are in a terrible, sad situation where the camps and lodges are mothballed. You've got some people looking after the place and it's devoid of life. And it's really a very depressing situation. And thankfully, our Desert Academy kept on going after the lockdown. And since May, we've got between 30 and 40 young people at Wolwedans that just get on with their training. And they are actually now in preparation of their assessments end of this year. So that is a perfect example where a second leg actually helps you to keep the water pumping and the wheels running. Okay, then we have got 5 C's: culture, commerce, community, conservation, and consciousness. What I really love about this slide is that this is the seed of the Hoodia, and you can see how it all interconnects, right? So because all these C's are interconnected and can't be seen in isolation. So I'm briefly going to explain what's behind the 5 C's. Consciousness is basically an approach where we want to make our guests aware of a lot of things that they might normally not be so aware of. It's basically covering how we consume and what we consume, what we eat, how we travel, where water comes from, where wastewater goes to, what happens to waste in general, and just strive to generate a higher level of consciousness. I mean, obviously this is new and we will sort of feel our way towards it. Conservation is quite clear. It's obviously the large landscapes, it's the whole nature conservation aspect, which in our case is actually taken well care of by the Namibia Nature Reserve, which has its own sort of management structure. And in our case, we see our levy collection as the main contributor towards conservation at this stage. But then conservation obviously also touches on issues like renewable energies, your water management, your wastewater management, obviously big one, waste, carbon reduction, etc. So it's quite a big basket. Community addresses what a company plows back into its community over and above providing jobs. And as long runners, we all feel that your community engagement must be much more meaningful. And obviously there's a wide range of things what one can do, ranging from medical, etc., to education, which is the one we chose. We'll get to that later. And then commerce. If you are not making money and if you are not running a profitable business, then you are obviously not sustainable. So in our case, the commercial aspect is the tourism operation, the Wolwedans collection. And last but not least, culture. Culture is obviously celebrating the cultural diversity of a country. Like in Namibia, we've got 12 different tribes and languages. And as you can see, it's a very colorful affair. So we try to celebrate that. And culture obviously also includes the arts, performing arts, and traditions and food, etc. Right, now we are going to walk the talk a bit and see how these 5 C's are lived at Wolwedans. So here you've got the matrix 25 on the left. You've got the matrix for the Arid Eden project. And in the heart, you see there's 9 projects which we refer to as our core projects. And that's where, whilst all the fields are equally important in terms of funding and resources, this is really where most impact happens. And then, in case there are any travel agents around, we also have a mission 1 for our tourism operation, which we call mission 1. So that's the whole hospitality kind of thing. So under consciousness, we've got 5 different themes. The first one is advocacy and activism. This is something we largely neglected in the past. Our social media presence was not very good. We were just not good at it. And it is very clear that going ahead, we need to invest a lot of time and energy and money into communication, both external and internal. And the matrix 25 with the 5 C's, I'm sure you will agree at the end of this presentation, provides a very rich bucket full of storytelling opportunities. And that's what we will do. We are actually looking at the embedded journalist concept. We will build a media room here at Wolwedans and constantly have 2 media people who are feeding the world with wonderful stories from Wolwedans. The second intervention under consciousness is what we call the Heart and Home Village Tour. We started this about 5 years ago, and it's basically a look behind the scenes. Some of the LCA members who were here have done that tour, and it's quite amazing. And it's actually a very conscious exercise, because you start with the water, you cover power, you go to the workshops, you go to the gardens, you go to the waste sorting plant, and people really get a much better understanding what it takes to operate out here in the middle of nowhere. And when they have a hot shower that evening, or an ice cold beer, I think there is a much higher level of appreciation, because they are conscious about what it takes to do these things. And it also helps to break down complex global issues like energy, like water, climate change. It helps people to actually understand it, because it's so complex out there in the world that you actually need it broken down onto a small palatable portion, and then you understand. The third field is what we call I3 Lab. It's the idea is to create an incubation, innovation, and inspiration lab in Wolwedans, where you have workshops, groups, corporate organizations. The LCA AGM that happened here last year was such a good example, where the AGM was an official administrative must-do, but 80% of the time it was actually an inspiration and innovation and incubation lab. So we really want to build on that, because we feel Wolwedans is the absolute perfect location out here in the desert, with the silence and the being away from it all, to do these kind of things. This picture, by the way, is something that happened 2 weeks ago. It was an event sponsored by the Goethe Institute called Games for Our Common Future. And we had 4 groups of youngsters from different universities in Namibia competing against each other, developing a game, board games. And the Wolwedans team did a board game called Wolwedans Heart and Home. And it was really fantastic. It's sort of a mix between Trivial Pursuit and Monopoly. And we will definitely expand on that. And who knows, maybe in 12 months' time, we will have a Wolwedans board game. Then we, under consciousness, we also want to go into the retreats. That's obviously yoga, mindfulness, but also family retreats, and drive the whole disconnect to reconnect thing. Then we talked about these different experiences, head, hand, heart, that are interconnected. And one experience we've been doing for a while now very successfully is what we call solitude. So we park our guests a good distance apart, at least 100 meters. We just park them there for an hour before sunset, give them a drink, take their handy or mobile that stays on the car, and let them sit there for a while and think about questions like, what is my purpose in life, or where am I going? And that's quite a intense activity. Or you could, for instance, pack a stone circle, which is a very mindful activity. Guests adopt or buy a pile of rocks, and then they can spend an hour and a half to pack a wonderful stone circle. It's a very meditative experience. And once you have packed your circle or you have planted a tree, we'll get to that later, you can stencil your name and date into a brass plate, and that will be put in there, and you leave your mark. And you are actually doing something real and something practical with your hands. And you will be amazed what an exciting exercise this is, because most first world people have lost the ability to do stuff with their hands. Or how about getting your hands dirty and working in the garden? So there is a lot of things you can do to enhance consciousness. Then we come to the next field, conservation. So conservation is the levy collection we talked about. That's driving conservation at Namibia. This is the big one. It's land expansion. This yellow area is Namibia today, and the green area is what we want to integrate in the next 10 to 20 years. It's the Namibia East expansion, and we want Wolwedans to be an active part of it. Why? So that fences can fall, that animals can roam. Many oryx get trapped in the fence. And if you see here at the bottom, the difference between commercial farmland and our grazing, it's quite remarkable. Then we are looking at going 100% solar by the end of 2021. We are sort of 80% there, which will be a major milestone. You are obviously talking fresh water and the management of it, very professional water systems and wastewater, because you can reclaim a lot of that. And if we want to make this place an arid Eden, we need lots of wastewater. It must be recycled to a very good, clean level. Then we are looking into waste recycling. That's one of the first projects now, is to build a whole new waste management setup. And another trash to treasure example is that we fill water bottles, which will be history soon, with dune sand, and then use them as bricks for building brick and mortar buildings. We are looking at reducing CO2 through our activities, and one is basically gradually changing our fleet from these fuel guzzling big Land Rovers to something light and soft, like these Suzukis. Ideally, you go e-biking and horse riding. We've got the Arid Eden Tree Project. So the plan is to plant 365 trees next year. The trees will be adopted by clients who are here or online, and then people can adopt a tree, it gets planted, and they can follow its growth. That's a fundraising thing. And this is last year. That's incidentally the Princess of Liechtenstein planting a tree, and it's a wonderful way to reconnect. Right, then we come to community. The first field there is education support. So we are already very much supporting the Waldorf School in Windhoek By the way, in Namibia, Waldorf is not an elite thing. 80% of the kids there are from marginalized backgrounds. And also the Dabeb Senior Secondary School in Malta Höhe, which is our closest town. And for that, we obviously need funds, both self-generated and from the outside. Another big theme is small enterprise development. This is like a little industry starting at Wolwedans where we want people to actually use their skill to become small entrepreneurs by doing something. And the big project here is the Wolwedans Arts and Crafts Center, where people will be empowered to actually produce and manufacture their own stuff, which will be sold at Wolwedans and beyond. Vocational training is the big one. We are currently doing hospitality. Next year, we want to start with horticulture, and 2022 with facility maintenance. So I think by 2022, we will have something like 75 trainees permanently at Wolwedans, and that's really a big force here. And it also really sort of secures our future because we have a constant inflow of great youngsters. Incidentally, 90% of them work for our competitors afterwards. Then we are looking at a rural revive project in Malta Höhe. That's the closest village, which is 180 km from here. The first phase will be a laundry that is to save water in the desert, and we hope that all lodges in the Sossusvlei area, or many, will have their laundry done there. So this is a big project. The next phase will be a water reclamation plant, then horticulture. So it's very much a copy-paste of what happens at Wolwedans. And the last field is recreation and sport. That's basically for the staff here to really make them excited and provide healthy lifestyles. It also includes housing and evening events. So those are the fields for community. Now we come to commerce. I mentioned that the driving force is the Wolwedans collection, our 4 camps. 3 of them are currently mothballed. And I have to use this opportunity to show you a picture of each camp. So that one is Dunes Lodge, the main area. That is the Wolwedans Dune Camp. So this is where it started with those 4 igloo tents. We are doing it bigger and better. That was planned before COVID and started. In hindsight, I would not have done it. I would have gone more basic again. That is our fabulous boulders camp, hugged by massive granite boulders. That's the new look. I have got some female advisors that always advise me that Wolwedans is too masculine and too much boys camp, and we need some textures and soft layers. So this is the outcome. I actually like it very much. I hope the girls are happy. In terms of activities, we covered that really a big push for going active. And I can assure you there's nothing more exhilarating than taking an e-bike, a fat e-bike, and cycling on the crest of a dune. And if you are too old or unfit, you can just cycle on the road. I think this is going to be one of our future signature experiences. Horse riding, family retreats, couple retreats. You can experience horticulture. We are looking at offering half-day, full-day, and 1-week horticulture course for our guests. And that brings me now to the next field, which is the desert-based economy. So our primary economy is tourism. That's where the big money is made. But there's also a secondary desert-based economy. And we are looking at really fostering entrepreneurship with our staff and with the trainees, and also bringing on board our neighbors, our region, by procuring local and not buying cool drinks in Windhoek and shipping them down here. We could rather serve a nice fresh orange lemon juice made by a farmer down the road. So the desert-based economy is a big theme. There's no time to go into detail. But yeah, a barber would be part of that future desert-based economy. So would be a butchery. And then another biggish project is the village hotel or guest house, because we will get a lot of people from the outside that will stay for longer. So we need to accommodate them. And I also want to create a new product where people actually immerse themselves into this Wolwedans village, because it's a very wonderful thing to do. And then I mentioned that earlier, we are going big time into horticulture. I mean, really producing over and above what we need. This is the new Wolwedans greenhouse, which was fortunately finished just before the lockdown. So we are in the commerce field, and one of our future legs to stand on is horticulture. I mentioned that under community and vocational training that we are planning to launch into horticulture and animal husbandry vocational training next year. We are busy compiling the training manuals, and then hopefully we'll get an accreditation. So horticulture under commerce is obviously the same thing, but it is actually about creating another commercial leg to stand on. And what you see here is a magnificent, beautifully designed greenhouse that we fortunately managed to finish before the lockdown. And in this high productive greenhouse, we are mainly growing salad. And the idea is to sell on a daily basis salads and fresh garden greens to our neighbors, especially in the north, because we will almost every day have a transfer from one of the Sossusvlei lodges bringing guests to Wolwedans. And then we are also working on a very quirky way to transport our greens at zero carbon, so non-refrigerated, and you will see some YouTubes on that in a few months' time. Anyway, so horticulture is actually becoming a commercial exercise, and quite interestingly, not sure whether I mentioned that before, all horticulture projects in Wolwedans are actually run under the umbrella of the foundation. So every head of salad that comes out of this greenhouse, which was financed through the Wolwedans Foundation, is sold to the business at market-related rates. So it's another avenue of creating income streams for the foundation. I mentioned animal husbandry, so that is part and parcel of the curriculum. And fortunately, we have got quite a lot of these animals with us already, bar cows, and that's a project for next year where we're looking at getting 5 to 6 Jersey cows so that we can make our own cheese going ahead. And last but not least, we've got an idea which has been milling for many, many years. It's the Wolwedans clothing brand. And I think with the Arid Eden project, once it's really taken root, it's such a beautiful story and a brand that is loaded with a story. So I think this could be quite successful. It's something we will probably start tackling in a few years' time. One must remember, after all, that we are talking 10 years here. Right, and that brings us to the last C, culture. Culture, as I said earlier on, is obviously naturally the whole aspect of celebrating cultural diversity, especially Namibia, where we've got 12 different cultural tribes, and all have their own traditions and their own costumes and their own foodstuffs, and you really want to try and bring that out, and instead of all going uniform and speaking one language. So under culture, we have 5 points. The one, and probably very important one, is what we call the Wolwedans way. So that's obviously our vision, the purpose, and it's also our values. This is our value pyramid, where you see our core or unique values, sorry, being balance, harmony, and transparency. And then we've got core values and substantial values. And then we've also got a value pyramid for the mission 1, which is now purely tourism related. And all this is on the foundation of the Wolwedans Compass, which is a wonderful moral sort of guide touching on creativity, honesty, positivity, and being fair. So to get this message across, obviously requires a lot of workshops, training sessions, etc. But I think for a business in the future, it is essential that the team really can associate with the vision of a business. Then under culture, we obviously have the arts. This is a beautiful example of a landscape art project we started at our Boulder Safari Camp last year. There's a long reason how it got to this, but we are sort of 90% there, having moved millions of rocks into these beautiful patterns. Culture also includes the performing arts like music and drumming, which is really becoming a key aspect of day-to-day life in Wolwedans, especially with our trainees from Desert Academy. And then we have performing arts. This was a very unique event where a guy parked himself in that Chateau Namibia, you know, the little place I showed you earlier, the perfect quarantine. He parked himself there for 40 days on his own in complete solitude and composed the Desert Symphony Humankind, which was supposed to be launched during the COVID time. So that's probably going to happen next year sometime. And then, once a year we have the Wolwedans Cultural Festival. Well, we had it for the first time last year, and it was a magnificent event with everybody rocking up in their traditional clothes. It's actually tying in to our winter games, and it's basically 2 full days of fun. It was so amazing and so colorful and so energized that we actually decided that next time, which was going to be this year, so next year we want to actually have guests as well, because it's something, you know, that should be experienced by outsiders as well. Right, and then the last block under culture is heritage preservation. This is, for instance, one of the farms in the future Namibia East, called El Dorado. And that's a farm we would really like to acquire through the Arid Eden project. And then you have this beautiful old farmhouse that needs to be restored to its former glory, and something can be made there. And that, I think, covers the Matrix 25. Coincidentally, when I was putting together this presentation, I stumbled over this photo, and I, to be honest, couldn't believe what I see. We will go into the logo of the Arid Eden project, but this gentleman here is Doug Tompkins. He was the famous founder of the North Face clothing company, and started huge conservation and projects in Patagonia. Unfortunately, Doug is not with us anymore, but he became a good friend of the family, and we connected very well. And I must really say that in addition to my father, Albi, Doug Tompkins is my other major role model. And I find it so befitting that our happy man is sort of really mirrored in this picture. Good, so this is the logo of the Arid Eden project. And you can imagine that it was very difficult, or no, challenging, to find a visual sign which sort of encompasses this very complex and beautiful story. And this is the outcome, and I would like to share with you where it comes from. So there is a plant growing in the Kalahari and Namib Desert, the Hoodia. It's a very endemic and highly resistant plant, doing well in these arid environments. And if you look at the picture, the big picture here, you see the seed pods of the Hoodia. That's one aspect. And those seed pods found their way into those 5 main strings. So that's 1 for every C. And then for every C, we obviously have those 5 parcels. So this is basically a whole bunch of seed pods, which create a lot of seeding. Then the overall thing is up here in the left corner, is like a burst of light, a burst of energy, which is also resembled in this logo. And then the overall shape of the logo is that of the Hoodia flower. And then, very importantly, with the whole aspect of happiness and putting people at the heart of things, look at this little bugger here in the lower corner left. That is a Hoodia seedling when it just comes out of the earth. And it's tiny, it's maybe a centimeter big. And I was so fascinated by this shape, which I'll hop back 2 slides, sort of resembles that, right? So anyways, we put the happy man in the heart of this logo, and I think it's a very beautiful logo. It's a logo that carries the message, and it's a logo that carries the Matrix 25. So now you might ask yourself, this is all very ambitious, and how are you going to fund it? And I must honestly tell you that at the moment, we are obviously completely strapped. We would have been able to tackle this by ourselves through the collection of levies, but we all know that it will take many, many years for tourism to return to its former numbers. And therefore, we are really dependent on outside help. But I'm very confident that with this message and with this journey, there will be people out there that want to come on board. And I love this quote from Gloria Steinem: "It is more rewarding to watch money change the world than to watch it accumulate." And that also reminds me, obviously, of my father's approach with a shirt that hasn't got a pocket. We've got a number of mechanisms for fundraising. I'll briefly touch on them. The one is crowdfunding, so that goes into the whole adopted tree thing. We will also map all the trees that have been planted at Wolwedans in the last 10 years and also give those free for adoption. So we've already got a good 150 trees, and we want to sell or give out for adoption another 365 next year. So that whole exercise should comfortably earn us $1 million for the Wolwedans Foundation. Then we've got a program called Club Chateau. It's been going for 15 years. It's basically pre-selling of beds at very good discounts. And that's very interesting for regulars who know that now we are, in need of oxygen. I think I haven't mentioned this, but I heard this the other day, which I think is excellent. They say, cash is the oxygen of a business. So we are obviously running out of air. So Club Chateau is an interesting one. Then we have number 4, Friends of Wolwedans. That is every now and then you have got people who want to sponsor a specific project. Like we had a lady from Amsterdam last year who put some money into the chicken farm. And this year we had a couple from the UK who put some money into a new nursery. So that's Friends of Wolwedans. And then you obviously have institutional grants or loans. That's by government agencies, both Namibia and abroad. And then number 3, this is actually the big one, the Arid Eden Angels. That is philanthropy funding for foundation projects, and primarily about 50% of that will go into the acquisition of additional land. So that's non-profit, and that's purely for conservation. And the other 50%, which could also be an interest-free loan, would be going into the development mainly of the Wolwedans Desert Academy, but also other projects like renewable energies and so on. And yeah, that actually brings me to the end of this talk. And this is our youngest daughter, Lulu, who is beautifully launching into a, I think, very positive future. And this is also the visual we are using for our first communication to the outside world after having been in hibernation for the last 6 months. So this is the launch of the Arid Eden project. And maybe to end, my father obviously was driven by conservation. That was his vision for this land. And I think for me, we want to build on this very healthy conservation foundation, but make human growth and development the core purpose of what happens at Wolwedans. So there's our new vision statement. Our purpose is the pursuit of happiness and Wolwedans exists to inspire a new way. And to end, I want to use this wonderful quote by Nelson Mandela: it always seems impossible until it is done. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, Stephan. It was an awesome talk and awesome photography. It was absolutely mouth-watering, that boulder camp, and yeah, some of that footage with those dramatic skies and the vastness of the desert is amazing. So yeah, I'm embarrassed to say I haven't been to Namibia, but you've just encouraged me to go that little much more. I'm just interested, from being from a sort of construction and infrastructure background, your actual construction of your camps. I mean, they look amazing and beautiful. Do you use only local people to construct them, and your materials? That's quite a challenge because you're literally in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, we do everything in-house. We have never done something with a contractor or so. And we, over the years, built quite good capacity, and you know, the whole design follows a very stringent sort of design guideline. So it's quite, yeah, the teams are quite well attuned to this kind of building. In terms of material, the wood comes from South Africa. It's all forested wood like pine, and I think it's pine, most of it. And you know, that's quite interesting. When we built the camp, the first camp, there was no money. You know, I had a budget of 300,000 to build a camp, and I wanted to build a classic safari camp, and you know, the dark hardwoods like teak was just completely out of the question, and we went for pine. And interestingly, today you would never build a lodge with teak, right? And pine is like a renewable, sustainable wood is the way to go. And these days we just seal the pine and paint it, and it works like a charm. So, yeah. But everything is done locally, including the architecture.
And the teams of the people, when they're not building, or do you sort of just keep that building continuing camp to camp the whole time? Or do they have other functions when they're not doing building?
No, we've got quite a big building team, and occasionally we bring in contractors. And rest assured, Marty, there is never not a building project. We took a 5-month breather now, but there's always building happening, and it's actually not happening fast enough. But you also don't want to overload the system with too many men out here in the desert. And incidentally, since a year and a half, we've got 4 carpenter ladies who are doing a great job. So yeah, no, there's a long list of projects, and then it's obviously the whole maintenance. And because there is so much maintenance, that's also one reason why we want to start with the facility maintenance training, you know, because you will always need those people. And not only tourism, you need them in schools, in clinics, on farms. So I think it's a very relevant qualification we are busy developing. And we got the qualification accredited, and now, yeah, we need to walk the talk and put beef to the whole project. But yeah, maintenance is obviously a key aspect. Maybe today more important than hospitality.
And then the one other thing that you said that made me a little bit sad, you were saying you were going to get rid of your fleet of Land Rovers. Have you considered electrifying them? And then you charge them with solar?
Yeah, we looked at that, Marty, but at this stage it's completely prohibitive in terms of cost. And who knows? Look, we will keep our Land Rovers for a vintage safari, but I think we will probably reduce our driving around by 50%. And those Land Rovers, we will keep them going, don't worry. But half of them will in any case be in the workshop.
Thanks, Stephan. And by the way, that was not a question, that was a statement that Marty made. We got your statement. Thanks, Marty. See, there's a question from Cleo Durr. Cleo, unmuting you.
Hi, Stephan, that was a fantastic talk. I mean, I think coming from an empath, it's really beautiful to see that there are initiatives, especially, you know, coming from the older generation, where they are seeing the importance of kind of the emotional space and kind of internalizing. And I was wondering, your whole holistic vision and kind of solitude experience, do you envision having people there? I mean, that can be quite a, yeah, I mean, it can be quite a tumultuous experience to go through. Do you envision having people there to kind of help people cope with whatever they're confronting when they are on these solitude experiences? Or is it a kind of, you know, you're out there, you have all these thoughts, you have all these emotions, and then you go back to your incredible room? Is there, I know you have your beautiful concept of rock circles and creating art, and I'm so at one with all of that as an artist myself. I was just wondering, just from a almost a psychological point of view, would there be any aspect of that integrated?
Thank you, Cleo.
Thanks, Chloe. Well, first of all, I think you mentioned, you put me into the category of old. I might be over 50, but I feel as young as a 30-year-old. Secondly, if we do this solitude exercise, I mean, that's something you can really do with every guest. And yes, it can be intense. In fact, I can share a funny anecdote with you. We once had a British royals, and they stayed with us for a whole week. It was a big family affair, and that's actually when we did the solitude for the first time. And one of the daughters, she was sort of 27, she said, you know, Stephan, what you did with us was more scary than the bungee jumping I did last week at Big Falls. So yes, it can be quite intense. If it's the 1 hour thing, I think the medication there is a stiff GNT. If it is the retreats, like the couple retreats and family retreats, where you really run a 1 week program, yes, we will definitely get experts that will, you know, coach the retreat, because of course it will be intense. And but we are sort of getting towards it. It's not something we are offering at this stage, but I'm very much aware that you can't put people into these intense emotional situations if you don't have some kind of backup system. So I think it's a very valid question. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephan. Just want to mention, you can answer this question, or Susanna can, but I think in fairness, I just want to mention that you might not have noticed, there was a question in the chat by Rhonda Coverse, which says, when do you think you will reopen Wolwedans for tourism? Susanna did respond to that. For those of you who want to look at it, maybe either you or Susanna could just respond to that question. When will you open for tourism?
Shall I answer the question? Look, we've got the Wolwedans private camp, which is sort of a private house, villa, and the Wolwedans Mountain View Suite, and those we keep operational, but our camps are all closed until mid-March, and we'll just play it by ear, because it's just, you know, see what's happening with Germany now. Imagine we had now gotten all ready and, you know, brought in a whole team, and then, you know, it stops again. So we want to keep it ticking, but on a very low scale, and really prepare for end of March, and then let's see, you know.
Anybody who's been to Wolwedans want to make any comments on what's been said? I don't know, would Eva Spiritus, would you like to come in and say anything? Paul Telfer, how about you?
Well, I would simply say that Stephan is doing an amazing job, and I was thoroughly impressed pre-COVID before he got involved, before all of this started happening, and it's the real deal. It's one of these places that you really do find consciousness. And as part of the LCA, when we had our board meeting, our council meeting there, it was amazing. And the levels that he goes to touch people's hearts and souls is amazing. Yeah, so that's what I want to say. He's a good guy. I really enjoyed this talk.
I did spend several weeks at Wolwedans, and one thing I can say is that Stephan is a true visionary, as we can see now. And we need people like Stephan with such strong vision now, I think more than ever, where a lot of people are obviously focusing on problems and on the challenge. And yeah, in times like this, it's very refreshing, and it's amazing to just look past everything and keep the vision alive. And I know that Stephan and whoever else, everybody else who's behind Wolwedans, they're capable of doing amazing things. And all of this is going to happen. So yeah, I'm looking forward to heading back there and to supporting Wolwedans. And yeah, hopefully I don't have to wait until 2030 to get back there.
Thanks, Eva. Suzanne Bailey Cooper, I saw your comment in the chat. Maybe you could say that verbally, please.
Well, I was just saying thank you so much, Chris. I work with Stephan like I do with Congo Conservation Company as well. And I think that what has been amazing working alongside Stephan has been his absolute dedication to transparency. And if we don't have accountability and transparency within the African tourism industry, we will never have sustainability. And the way that he is able to be so open, right from the way that they do their back of house, everybody's welcome to go and see what's happening, right down to their financials, and share that, I think is completely extraordinary. We are an industry, I think, that is actually has generally been seen to be geared towards making, I'm sorry to say this, white people benefiting from tourism, which I think has been to our detriment here in South Africa, especially in terms of how the government has managed things during lockdown. And we as an industry need to be far more transparent about how we run our businesses and the impact that we have, and make it far more transferable in terms of the benefit that goes out towards a wider community. It is about our guests and it is about our bottom line, but it should be about the people that we're impacting as well, about the communities and other things like that. And I think Stephan's dedication to really making a difference is something that should be heralded as a wonderful example. And I've certainly used his business model and his ideas in inspiring many of our other members across our portfolio as well. But it truly is a fantastic person to work with and a wonderful company to be working alongside. So thank you.